Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to the second half of my podcast with Dr. Joel Furhman. Dr. Joel Furhman has written 7 number one New York Times bestsellers, and he is talking to us about the importance of nutrition and what he thinks about various diets and how we can shed weight and keep it off, and also how we can avoid heart attacks, diabetes, strokes, dementia, and many other diseases of aging.
Let's talk about heart disease. So heart disease is America's leading cause of death and claims more than 600,000 lives annually. Can you tell us what your prescription for reversing and preventing heart disease is?
That's what's so important for people to grasp here. And to prevent stroke and to prevent heart disease are very similar to each other because the same healthy diet. I'm saying something really radical here. I'm saying that these diseases that afflict Americans and kill us are unnatural for the human species. They're not seen in nature or in primitive humans much. In other words, the Catawba Island study showed that there was no heart attack deaths on the island. They didn't salt their food and eat processed foods and animal products. They just were gardeners. They mostly were local farmers and ate wild food. And just like primitive Amazon tribes that are separate from civilization, that are isolated from civilization, that don't salt their food and eat natural foods in the jungle, don't see blood pressure rise as people get older. And the most elderly members have the same blood pressure as children. You know, what's interesting is that in this country, we see that toddlers have a lower blood pressure than teenagers, that blood pressure rises in childhood. And I'm saying that even teenage blood pressures are higher than what we see compared to the middle-aged and elderly in these primitive tribes and populations that eat natural foods and don't salt their foods, because their elderly blood pressures are closer to toddlers' blood pressures, not the teenage blood pressures in the United States. It's kind of radical thought process. And right now, by the time you're 70 years old, more than 70 to 80% of Americans are on blood pressure medications. Everybody's on blood pressure medications. If you eat American food, you develop diseases other Americans get. You know, when I speak to big audiences of physicians at health and medical conferences, I usually say to the doctors in the audience, I say, raise your hand if you've been shot by a bullet or stabbed by a knife, or somebody in your family has had that happen to them. And like there's 500 people in the audience and one person will raise their hand, 2 people will raise their hand. And I'll say, and what about anybody who had a heart attack or a stroke, or maybe a cancer diagnosis? Anybody here in the audience with a heart attack or a stroke or a cancer diagnosis, somebody in your family with that? And like everybody's hand goes up. And I say, and that's a dangerous neighborhood that you're going to keep living in? You want to stay living in that neighborhood where almost everybody you know, including your own family, are having these terrible life-shortening tragedies and they're suffering with things that don't have to happen, that you can escape and get out? So the point is that the whole modern Western world is eating a diet that's just self-destructive and crazy, and heart disease is totally unnatural. And even if you look back in medical history, we don't see much cancers in primitive times. We have good records on medical causes of death from the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. It's only about in the 16th century that you start to see scrotal and testicular cancers be the most prevalent cancer seen in men who worked as chimney sweeps or who breathed in smoke. You didn't see much breast and prostate, even when they uncovered more than 150 mummified remains of people in the Middle East and things. We found that there were no cases. The cause of death were not breast and prostate and rectal cancers and heart attacks. They were relatively, we're talking about the most common causes of death are rare, would be very rare causes of death in more primitive times.
But wasn't part of that
No, that's also
the
a
life
complete
expectancy?
myth. Let's see, the American lifespan today, which for males is about 76 and females about 79. Let's just look at that today and compare it, because back hundreds of years ago, don't forget, 1 in 9 women died during childbirth, and you had a very high infant and childhood mortality rate. So it looks like the average death was about 50 to 55 years old. But that's because they put into the statistics all the kids that died in the first year of life and all the women that died during childbirth. So instead of looking at those statistics, we look at people who survived their childhood, like Renaissance artists who lived in the 14th and 15th century. They lived long enough to produce works of art, like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and other 200 Renaissance artists who were males who didn't die giving birth. And among those,
I would hope not.
yeah. So the point is, among those people who survived their childhood, their average age of death was greater than the average age of death of males today. So once you survive childbirth and childhood, you're not living longer today than they did many centuries ago.
Now, if someone has symptoms of heart disease and starts a nutraterian diet, what is the typical amount of time it takes to begin seeing positive effects, such as reduced blood pressure, lower cholesterol, and healing of the obstructed arteries?
Within days. Within 1 week, the person's risk of having a heart attack may be dropped 100-fold because you have a least propensity to blood to clot, to throw off a thrombus or an embolus or something. When you start bathing the body with like fried food and burgers and bacon and start to be throwing fat, inflammatory fat into your bloodstream, you just stop that, and you could take the blood 2 days later and see the blood is lower. Triglycerides are cut down by a half, and that you could test. So there are things we could test, inflammatory markers like HSCRP, myeloperoxidase, and oxidized LDL that change to a more normal range within a few weeks on the diet. And we see blood pressure drop precipitously, so much so that I'm giving a warning to people that if they're adopting this type of diet, they have to be in close contact with their physicians. For example, I had a guy who came here, and he was eating really unhealthily, including fast foods. And he was significantly overweight with a big belly, and he was using 80 units of insulin a day. But I knew how bad his diet was, and I knew that he could become hypoglycemic if I didn't cut his insulin out pretty fast. When he goes to eating that badly to a diet this good. So I stopped his full 80 units of insulin when he came in the first night. I said, you arrived. Let me just see where your sugars run for a few days with no insulin here. And believe it or not, by not the following morning, but the morning after that, he was already on no insulin. But he was using long-acting insulin like Lantus or whatever, But the morning after that, he was starting to become agitated and combative, and he was hypoglycemic. I called 911. Luckily, I had some things on hand, and I was able to put something in his mouth, so I didn't need any urgent services to get him to a hospital. He recovered in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But just to show people how fast the body reduces its sugar from over-consuming medication, and from this diet works so quickly. For example, there was a physician who came here because he was left right from the hospital, AMA in Nashville. He was told he needed urgent placement of a stent. And I said, if it was urgent, it's not urgent. This is an elective stent. They're scheduling you for a few days from now because you're having chest pain as a result of your angiogram. If it was urgent and you were having a heart attack, you'd have markers of cardio damage. They'd be running you into the emergency room right now. This is not an acute coronary syndrome. This is an elective placement of a stent. And leave the hospital and come right here. And he left the hospital, came here, and he did fine. Over the last couple of months he spent here, he was eventually walking hills and hiking for miles, and he lost 50 pounds, in the 3 months he was here. And he went back to Nashville with no heart disease, no chest pain, no high blood pressure, no medications, and no future of having to worry about these conditions continue to accelerate and cause his death. And the biggest thing it gives people is control and the feeling that they have confidence and lose their fear, because fear is not a good thing. It's not good for your health to be fearful and to be thinking you're going to die in a minute and going into the running back and forth to hospital emergency rooms and doctor's offices being treated for serious illnesses. That is scary and needless.
So what do you think about the extremely low-fat vegan diet that has been used in the past to reverse heart disease? What are your concerns with this kind of diet?
I think it's been documented to be effective at enabling people to reverse heart disease. But it's still not the diet that I recommend, because I feel that going that low in fat to that extremely low in fat could increase the risk of cardiac arrhythmias and atrial fibrillation due to lack of ALA. So instead, I recommend people have a small amount of walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, a small amount of nuts and seeds, even if they're overweight, such as a half an ounce with each meal, a total of 1.5 ounces of nuts a day, compared to those cardio reversal programs that tell people not to eat any oil, any avocado, and any nuts and seeds. I'm saying when you restrict all fatty foods to that degree, you get to a level that can cause other issues. And I also recommend people know their omega-3 index.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about omega-3. Mm-hmm.
Because I originally got into this style of treating patients back when my father was sickly. When I was a child, I was a teenager. I was learning and reading Dr. Shelton's works from the American Natural Hygiene Society and attending health conferences by the time I was 19 years old. And the people who were, you could say, my mentors and teachers who got me excited about nutrition, they became older and I became a physician. And in their later years, some of them developed Parkinson's, dementia in their 90s, and other issues, that I actually became the doctor caring for these groups of elderly plant-based and vegan communities, measuring their blood tests and seeing what was the risk factors that put them at risk of these conditions, their neurologic conditions they developed in later life. And I found that the omega-3 index being low correlated and was a major risk factor and a major concern for people following plant-based diets. So I'm very careful to make sure the person knows their omega-3 index and is supplementing with a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid accordingly to keep their index in the favorable range to reduce the risk of inflammation of the brain, Parkinson's disease, or dementia in later life, because we're going to live so much longer. If you're going to be dead between 75 and 80, like most Americans, it probably wouldn't even matter. But if we're going to push that envelope of human longevity between 90 and 100, 95 to 105, then we want to make all the right choices in our middle ages to protect brain size and make sure we don't develop cognitive impairment due to low fatty acid exposure through the last, 3 decades of life.
Now, you were a national figure skater, if my information serves me well. And you obviously have never had a problem with weight. But let's talk about dieting and losing weight, which is a concern for many people.
Yes.
You say someone can lose 20 pounds in the first 6 weeks on your Eat to Live diet. And in your book, you talk about toxic hunger and real hunger. What's the difference?
Yes, my experience over the last 35 years is that most individuals who are overweight following this program lose at least 15 pounds the first month. If they lose 10 pounds, I usually know they didn't follow the program all the way. And don't forget that I'm saying that we're controlling what people eat and also how much they eat too. Because I'm saying that when they start to flood their body with the excellent nutrition and fibers, it naturally reduces the appetite or normalizes the appetite and makes you instinctually desirous of the right amount of calories. It's eating the wrong food that stimulates cravings and doesn't turn off the apostat in the brain that makes people become a calorie-consuming monster, I say, that wants more calories. You know what I mean? That requires and desires more calories. There's something abnormal with being desirous of so many calories. But it's not really abnormal. It's normal because they're consuming American food, which is not food that's well adapted to the design of the human species. So they're normal for an American. And if they were a normal weight, there might be something wrong with them. Because most people in America who are a normal weight with BMIs below 23 are people who are alcoholics or smoke cigarettes or have some medical condition keeping them thin. Because if they were normal and healthy, they'd gain weight on the American diet. So one of the factors driving people to overeat is this concept of toxic hunger. It means that when you're eating unhealthy foods, you build up more toxic metabolites in the body, more advanced glycation end products, more reactive oxygen species, more ammonia, so there's more noxious, both metabolic and exogenous wastes. In other words, there's waste produced by the body from metabolism, and there's waste that we take in from the external world called exogenous waste, from food, smoke, chemicals. There's waste products like free radicals we produce from our own body. And the body is always trying to remove the level of waste to keep the integrity of its cells clean, because the body is trying to maximize healing and maximize our health and longevity. And I'm saying that when we are toxic to a degree or eating unhealthfully, and we stop eating food and digestion then finishes, the body more effectively can self-clean and repair itself in the non-digesting state. It's like if you were smoking cigarettes and you stopped smoking, and the next couple of days you're going to feel terrible coming off cigarettes because you're going to go through withdrawal from nicotine. It's still good you're feeling worse, because withdrawal is healing, is detoxifying, is removing noxious products. When you stop drinking 5 cups of coffee a day, you're going to have headaches from withdrawal from caffeine because your body is trying to remove some of these pro-inflammatory substances from the meninges around the brain and circulate these things in your blood supply. And as you circulate toxic waste in your blood supply, you become more fatigued and feel brain fog, and you feel more uncomfortable. And what I'm saying right now is the body self-healing and detoxification when you're not digesting food. When you start digesting again, you stop healing and repairing. So people don't feel well when they're not digesting food anymore because they start to go into a detox phase and they start to feel fatigued. And because eating again makes them feel better and takes away their fatigue, they think they have a higher caloric need, and they equate fatigue with hunger because eating gives them a burst of energy. I'm saying stomach cramping, headache, stomach fluttering, fatigue, being angry, irritated, agitated, those are not symptoms of hunger. those are symptoms of detoxification from an improper diet. So when people eat healthy enough, those symptoms go away and they start to get in touch with real hunger, which is felt in the upper part of their chest and the lower part of their neck right here. And it's not a painful sensation. It just makes food taste better. It's accompanied by enhanced taste sensation. And of course, you want to eat food. The people have to understand that we're not eating food to keep our energy up. We don't need food to keep our energy up. You have enough energy on your body with the fat on your body. You could just eat right off the fat. And some people are 50 pounds overweight. They can go for 50 days without eating if they had to. But the point I'm making is that by understanding and removing toxic hunger is one of the foundational principles or tools people use to start desiring the right amount of calories, but their taste buds improve and they start to feel satisfied with lesser calories when they stop detoxing from a poor diet.
So how can this food addiction, this vicious cycle of food addiction, be broken?
It's difficult. Over the years, I've written numerous books, and some of my earlier books gave people the option in advocating more of a baby step method of improving their diet. But now in more recent years, my experience has demonstrated that people who make a more gentle or gradual change to healthier eating are more likely to have binges and more recidivism, and because they keep lighting the fire under their addictive desires by going back to eating junk food and things that this illicit love affair they had with
stress eating.
Yeah, it's just like an alcoholic. It's better to get off alcohol completely. You increase the chance of long-term freedom from alcoholism, or less if they're staying away from alcohol. The minute they try to have it on weekends or one drink or two drinks a week, you're already increasing the risk. So we're finding that when people jump into this with both feet and they have enforced abstinence from these addictive triggers, and I'm saying oil and sugar and fried foods and meats, to just take everything out and eat so healthfully. And when you do that strictly, and when you go to a drug rehab center, to lower the chance of recidivism, they're in that center for 3 months. They don't have any cocaine, any heroin, any narcotics for at least 3 months, because they want the person really to get rid of these cravings for these and not have any type of toxic relationship with these foods anymore, with these drugs anymore. And the same thing is true with food. It's really important and increases the chance of learning how to love eating this way if people really eat this way and don't keep putting the high salt, high fried, high calorically dense foods back in their mouth, and readjust your taste buds and your taste muscle for natural foods. That's why I built this center in San Diego here, where people come and stay here for a month or 2 or 3, because they learn to cook the food. They know how to make it taste fantastic, but they're separated from their addictive triggers long enough. So when they go home, they have the tools, the knowledge and the emotional learning and the wisdom teachings to know how to not eat in a self-destructive manner and continue the benefits they learned here. But most people learning my program don't have to come to a retreat like this. Most people can do it by reading books, watching videos, and then by doing it on their own, but they have to remove all the junk from their house and make their home a protective home environment. Get a big construction garbage bag and throw out all the junk and tell everybody you're going to switch to a nutraterian diet. You're going to put your health first. Just like when you quit smoking, you announce to everybody you're quitting smoking because you want their support. You don't want them to sabotage your desire to quit. And the same thing here. You publicly announce what you're doing. You ask people's help to not sabotage you. You remove these substances that are tempting you from your environment, and you start to see the magic happen. Because when you do it 100%, not 90%, it's like magical. Your weight just pours off you, your blood pressure drops, you think more clearly, the brain fog lifts, you have more energy, your joints feel better, and you start to feel younger and more vibrant, right? Within a short period of time.
But there is a lot of social pressure to eat dangerously.
That's why we do a lot of teaching here about that. We teach because that's a major cause of people's problems with recidivism. And the reason what we're teaching them is that they've been socialized in this culture where we're building our own self-esteem with externally generated sources of self-esteem. We want people to approve of us, to like us. We want to impress them with how we look or what we've achieved, or how, we have to argue to make sure we're not put down in any way. We're so narcissistically involved with protecting our egos and having a ego-based self-esteem, that we're trying to teach people that those things don't lead to long-term happiness. Getting other people's approval is not giving you peace and internally generated self-esteem. So when a person confronts you on how to get your protein, or if I had to eat like that, I'd rather be dead and just kill me right now if I had to live on carrot sticks the rest of my life or something, whatever they're saying to you. You're being mindful now that you don't have to protect your ego and get in an argument with another person, because you know that your purpose here is to have creative goodwill for another person. And your internally generated self-esteem is based on your ability to be kind and useful to humanity and the external world, and not to try to build up yourself as being special or different or impressive. It's to be useful. And by being a role model, you can be more useful to others. Being able to learn how to have creative goodwill for others gives you the possibility of having a good effect on somebody else. You don't have to have the good effect. You just have to go attempted to have that possibility to have a good effect on them. And what I'm saying, as people start to change their emphasis from externally generated self-esteem to internally generated self-esteem, they lose the necessity of peer pressure and social pressure to have a negative effect on them, because they become at ease and peaceful with being different from other people. And they feel that their own mission of being useful to others is enhanced by being different, and they can be a role model. It's almost that they gain superpowers to have a beneficial effect on the external world. And it's really our care for and feeling for the external world that determines our long-term emotional health, not how important we are or we think we are. So yes, the difficulty lies when a person's been living for external generated self-esteem and they want to change their diet, and they're going to get the disapproval of their peers that makes doing this difficult.
In your book, Fast Food Genocide, you say that you think that our consumption of fast and processed foods is dangerous for future generations. How so? Don't babies start off with a clean slate, health-wise?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't. It's sad. And as you know, I've had this mission for many decades, spreading this information, and I've spread it to a lot of people. I mean, I've had 5 different PBS television shows and raised over 70 million for public broadcasting, which means that many, many people bought my books and tapes and things, and that's kind of amazing, you know. But it's still seen as being non-mainstream and radical thinking. It's not the way most people think. And I'm saying that not only am I telling people that they can protect their own health against heart attacks and strokes, but I'm also saying other things here. I'm saying the major contributory factors to later life cancer is what we ate in the first 20 years of our life, that we cause more damage in our childhood than we do in our later years. When cells are replicating and dividing, the cells are more susceptible to damage. Number one, smoking when you're young, it's not only our lifetime exposure to salt and cigarettes and bad food that affects our later life health, but also, and it's not even the perinatal exposure when the mother is pregnant. It's even the mother's diet prior to conception affects the health of her eggs. And that, for example, there are studies that show that the consumption of luncheon meats like pastrami, bologna, and bacon and hot dogs prior to conception increases a woman's risk of having a child with acute blastocytic leukemia or brain tumors or autism. That junk food and fast food is linked to autism in the mother, and the lack of green vegetables is also a protective factor against childhood cancer. And it's not the green vegetables during pregnancy as much as the green vegetables in the whole childhood and years prior to conception, because the egg that form our future children are living in the woman's body before her birth, because those eggs were formed when she was still in the mother's womb. And the chance of unhealthy behaviors can cause damage to the eggs that can then form your children. So a person can be born with genetic defects and a propensity for autism. And when they get the brain tumor at 12 years old, one of those causes could be the mother's diet before she conceived the baby. So yes, this is complicated. And if we're talking about winning the war on cancer, the education has to be multi-generational. It's like I'm arguing this. I'm saying that if the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology are telling people with heart disease to reduce their salt intake radically to 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day or less, that is utterly ridiculous, even stupid. Because if it's true that people with heart disease should be eating low sodium, then why would you wait till they have advanced heart disease to tell them that? If it was true that we wanted people with heart disease to having lower sodium intake, then the whole population should be doing it, not just people with heart disease, because why should we let people develop heart disease and then tell them that information? It's like telling a person to cut out smoking if they develop lung cancer. The whole thing is crazy. It's the whole population shouldn't be smoking. The whole population shouldn't be salting the food. The whole population, including children, should be eating a high green vegetable diet. The whole population should be doing the right thing. The point is that doctors can't just target sickest people to have healthiest lifestyles. If it's right for the sick people to have healthy lifestyles, then it's right for the whole population to have a healthy lifestyle. We don't wait for people to get sick and then tell them to change their diets.
Totally. So, do you have any views on the various diets that come and go from time to time, like Atkins, South Beach, intermittent fasting, and so on? Do any of them work?
Well, the Atkins, the keto, the carnivore, these high animal products diets, they didn't really come and go. They came and lost favor and reappeared with a different name, and lost favor due to bad outcomes, and they reappear with a different name all over again. And they keep reappearing with a different name with a different slant, because people just love their consumption of animal products, and they want to think that they can lose weight and be healthy eating diets rich in animal products. And, there are lots of ways you can lose weight. You can take drugs to lose weight, which is not the safest way to lose weight. You can smoke cigarettes to lose weight too. You can eat a diet of, eat a keto or a diet, because the original Atkins diet was a keto-based diet. It was restricting carbohydrates to levels so low that people go into ketosis to accelerate weight loss. But the problem with that is we've followed people following those patterns of eating for decades with not one study, but with numerous studies over the years showing that these people have the highest amount of early life deaths. Let me say that one more time, that people with the strictest adherence to keto-based diets, with the amount of animal products and the restriction of carbohydrates to facilitate ketosis, those individuals show the highest percentage of people followed for decades to be having early life deaths, and early life deaths are deaths before the age of 70. You have the most people dying before the age of 70 who follow those diets. So it's not something that we don't have good data on at this point, but that doesn't stop people from trying to promote those diets for weight loss. And they don't give you that good weight loss outcomes. They just give you better long-term. They give you better weight loss. They do facilitate weight loss to some degree, and maybe better than the standard American diet, which is also dangerous, but still, people don't generally get to their ideal weight. And I'm saying the ideal weight that maximizes human lifespan is for a male to have a body fat below 15% and a female to have a body fat below 25%. Saying that 77% of Americans are overweight or obese is not true, because the U.S. health authorities use a BMI of 25 as the demarcation line between normal weight and overweight, and all long-lived individuals in society with BMIs below 23, the maximum BMI lifespan for a male is below 22, and for a female is below 21. So to achieve that, you're not going to achieve that degree of success easily on a keto or carnivore diet. But even if you could, it still would not be a healthy way to do so. We need these plant chemicals and high amounts of these plant-based foods, and chronic ketosis is not a good way to lose weight. It's not safe long-term for the human body.
Correct. And what do you think about Ozempic? That's the latest. What would you say is the best reason not to use it?
I think that the long-term risks of those medications are just beginning to be revealed. Any medication, we don't know the risks of medications until they're used for decades by large numbers of people. And we know that
all the time.
Using proton pump inhibitors, Nexium, and are been shown to increase risk of cardiovascular death if used long-term, for long periods of time. So we learn more about these things over time. And my suspicion is because the long-term toxicity of a substance is usually proportional to its efficacy. And the most efficacious drugs and most toxic are going to have the most long-term dangers. And because they're more efficacious, and the probabilities are they'll increase of later life cancers. We know they increase with gastroparesis and other digestive impairments, and they'll have other negative black box warnings in the next 5 or 10 years on these drugs as well. And the minute you stop them, you gain the weight back again. So it's better to just start eating healthy and learn how to eat healthfully long-term. My specialty and my niche is to try to motivate, educate, and teach people how to get well without drugs, so they don't have to then incur the burden, the cost, and the possible risks of taking drugs, which are never going to be the answer to optimal health.
Now, will people enjoy food as much eating so healthfully? I think that's one of the concerns people have.
I know, definitely. And, I did a study on that published in 2010. It was published in a journal called Nutrition Journal. And the name of the study was The Changing Perception of Hunger on a high nutrient density diet. That was the title of the study. And we found that hunger changed, but we also found in that study with more than 600 participants that people told us how long it took them to like the new way of eating compared to their old way of eating. And it kind of surprised me with the findings because I thought people were going to stay 3 to 4 months. They like this way of eating as much as their old way of eating. And in fact, I found that most people said 5 to 6 months, not 3 to 4 months. So yes, people's taste buds change. You like what you eat regularly. When you heavily salt your food, you deaden your taste for salt. When you put a lot of sweetener on your foods, you deaden your taste for sweeteners. So berries don't taste as sweet and the banana isn't as sweet. I love banana ice cream made with frozen bananas, whipped with macadamia nuts and real vanilla bean powder with no date in there and no sweetener. The only sweetener is the frozen banana. That's sweet enough. Because our ability to taste sweet and to taste salt and to taste spice and to taste these flavors are enhanced because we're not deadening them with overkill to the bliss points. You know what I mean? The conventional food damages people's taste buds. We do have great chefs, and I do have to brag about how the incredibly great recipes we make, the Thai curry sauces and all the different salad dressings and the soups. And people even come here when their taste buds haven't even changed all the way, and they still love the food. But your ability to like it even more is enhanced. There's no difference in your enjoyment of eating going from a standard way of eating to a nutraterian way of eating over the long term. It's only in the short run that you may feel that you're missing these things and may feel that you're not getting things that you enjoy eating as much. It's only in the short term.
And you have a recipe book, correct?
I have numerous recipe books. I probably have 10 of them. I have a book called, T20, Reverse High Blood Pressure. I have Immune Protection, T20, which gives a recipe menu plan book for, my best-selling recipe book is the Eat to Live cookbook. And because that was my best-selling book was Eat to Live. My newest book is Eat for Life. And people come to my website, they can join, they can, get involved with things on the website. Eat to Live was my most famous book that was revised, and the one you held, it was published in revised version in 2011. Initial version was written in 2004. So the Eat to Live cookbook is the best-selling cookbook. But at drfurhman.com, I have thousands of recipes that can be searched for by type and by menu. So in other words, people can say, I want desserts, I want salad dressings, I want soups with kale in them, and they're scored by members with stars of which is the dressing that has the most 5-star ratings. Just like you go to Amazon and see the ratings, people rate the recipes. So it makes it fun.
Right.
And people could pick the recipes with the best ratings. This is a fun way to live. And you live, obviously, with the freedom to enjoy your life into your later years without losing your physical abilities, your athletic abilities, and your mental sharpness.
After my husband read your book, the first thing he said to me was, that diet is hard. What do you say to people who think the diet is going to be hard even before they even try it?
Getting cancer and being on chemotherapy, that's hard. Having your chest cut open and having bypass surgery, that's hard. Being confined to a wheelchair or being stuck in a nursing home the rest of your life, that's really hard. I'd rather not even know if I want to be alive. But eating healthy foods that made by nature in delicious ways that free you up from medical tragedies is not hard. It's joyous. It's blissful. It's pleasurable. It makes you proud.
It's radical.
It makes you enjoy food. You're mindfully looking at the bok choy and the fresh fig you're eating and knowing the beauty is in there, the thousands of nutrients in there. We're feeling for the people that helped grow the food and our connection to them and the fact that we're protecting the natural world and how delicious we made this food taste. It's only radical because people don't have the experience of living it and doing it and realizing how pleasurable it is and rewarding it is to live this way. So I would object to that.
When people say they prefer to die rather than have to eat this way, they'd rather die younger.
That's their
right. Do you
right.
have an answer for them?
Yeah. You have your right and you have free will to follow a carnivore diet or to eat a standard American diet or eat ice cream every night or to drink alcohol at bars or to do whatever you want. I'm all for people doing whatever they want. But I think that people should be thoroughly educated into the long-term outcome.
To be able to make the choice.
To be able to make those choices for themselves. And unfortunately, I'm making the claim that people are not educated. They don't have enough information to make that decision. They weren't trained this way through their childhood. They've become indoctrinated and addicted to healthy eating, and they don't have control of their bank. They don't control their bank. The cerebral brain is no longer in control. It's their primitive brain is in control. Their addictions are making decisions for them, and they're not even have the freedom to choose to be healthy or not. They're driven to overeat and eat unhealthfully by cravings. And so your husband and other people, their opinion is based on their addictions and not by their cerebral brain. And they would take a lot of information. You know, when I wrote Eat to Live, I wrote in the first chapter, I wrote, don't change your diet and don't make a decision right now. Read the whole book first. Get all the information and knowledge you need, because it's going to take a lot of information and knowledge so you know how you're going to feel, know what's going to happen, and to learn the rest. So in other words, get information. And then all those questions and doubts and excuses melt away and don't have any meaning, because you're liking eating this way just as much and you're getting so much benefit. And all these people that have lost 50 to 100 pounds and kept it off for 5, 6, or 10 years and now got their health back, they all say they love living this way. They enjoy the food more than they used to enjoy. They enjoy eating more, and they're so blessed to have their life back. These people don't tell that was it worth it? They're extremely grateful. And I'm, of course, blessed and grateful for this opportunity to be a physician specializing in nutrition, to have been able to impact so many people's lives, and so many people that put their trust in me to read my information, to study it, and to utilize it and apply it to their lives.
Yeah, I think doctors also need to give patients more options, as you said, by education. Is it worth taking vitamins and supplements in addition to the plant-based diet?
I'm saying yes and no. Yes, because total plant-based eating makes your diet suboptimal in certain nutrients like B12, zinc, and DHA EPA. Those are the main three. However, I'm also saying no, because certain supplemental ingredients like beta-carotene, vitamin A, acetyl palmitate, and retinol palmitate, vitamin folic acid, in other words, there are certain supplemental ingredients in standard multivitamins that have been shown to increase cancer risk. So I'm saying do not take standard multivitamins. They contain substances such as folic acid, beta-carotene, vitamin A, and even isolated vitamin E that could have negative effects on your health. But yes, take targeted supplements to the areas in which your diet could be suboptimal on, to make sure there's no area of concern based on your eating style. For example, I do on my website give people supplemental recommendations and food and supplemental products that they could take to make sure they're not deficient, or make sure they optimize the nutrients that are low on the particular diet they're eating. Mm-hmm. So I do recommend people take a plant-based DHA EPA and monitor that level with an omega-3 index test if they're 100% plant-based. Whereas people decades or years ago could have eaten oysters, fish, sardines, got more omega-3 through seafood, and got more zinc and B12 from the regular consumption of animal products like frogs and salamanders and seafood, whatever that humans ate. You know, they could do that too, right? You don't have to take supplements for zinc and EPA and DHA. But unfortunately, with modern agriculture, with so much runoff of nitrogen, commercial farming, and commercial dumping, we dump more than 1,000 pounds of tons of plastic into the ocean every hour, that I don't think eating enough fish to get adequate DHA is the right way to go anymore, because you get exposed to too much microplastic particles. And there's been clusters of ALS and Parkinson's dementia syndrome around coastal waters and lakes where people eat more seafood, particularly people eating bivalves and shellfish. Bivalves are things like clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops, because the runoff of the agricultural chemicals have caused algae bloom and overgrowth that causes an explosion of cyanobacteria that produce BMAA. And they test BMAA levels in fish and bivalves and find it's probably 50 times higher in bivalves and shellfish than it is in deep sea fish. And unfortunately, I used to think sardines were less polluted than large fish that could have mercury in them, like tuna and swordfish and shark. But now there's so much plastic in the digestive tract of sardines that when you eat the whole fish, you get exposed to a lot of microplastic particles. So at this stage in human history, we're saying probably moving to a mostly vegan diet is better than one where you're getting those supplemental nutrients from seafood or fish, because we're going to eat seafood, we're going to keep it to very small levels, not to try to get an adequate amount of all those nutrients from the regular consumption of seafood. So we're trying to idealize the diet and still move towards a more plant-based diet for the environment, for protection against climate change, and also for our own personal health.
For health. It
makes a lot of sense in today's world to move as much as possible to a plant-based diet and then take a few supplements to give you what you would have been missing in animal products if you require that.
Finally, can you name 3 foods we should avoid and 3 foods we should eat every day?
Well, just 3 foods we should eat every day?
The top ones.
Well, the top ones are G-bombs, but of course I'm saying that green vegetables, both raw and cooked, is probably the most important food, but I want people to eat onions and mushrooms and nuts and seeds every day as well.
Are you still recommending a pound of salad a day?
Well, overall, I'd like people to eat a pound of raw vegetables a day. You can split it up between lunch and dinner, and 1 carrot or 1 tomato could weigh half a pound. But yes, I want people to eat a significant amount of raw vegetables and cooked vegetables. I remember when one of my daughters was 4 years old, she would take a whole 10-ounce box of frozen broccoli to nursery school with her. That's 10 ounces of cooked vegetables for a 4-year-old. So a pound of vegetables a day for an adult seems like a lot, but it's not really that much.
And what foods should we avoid?
Well, you should avoid sweeteners, animal products that are barbecued or baked to darkened or crispy or browned. If you're going to put any animal products in your diet, it should be water-based cooking, cooked in a soup or a sauce or a wok, or where you're not going to darken, brown, or bake or barbecue it or burn the outside, which increases the polyaromatic hydrocarbons and heterocyclic amines that makes it more cancer-causing. If you're going to put a little chicken or turkey in your soup, or have a little fish that's in your stew or something, or cook it on a low flame or in a water-based cooking method. The point I'm making is don't barbecue and darken things or overcook. And then, so the most important things not to eat are fried foods and barbecue foods and processed meats and sweets. And don't forget, I consider commercial baked goods and white flour to be a sweet, and I consider them to be not even a food, but a drug. So that's avoiding a tremendous amount of the American diet, because 60% of the American diet is just the processed plant foods alone, is 60%. Oils and junk food and processed foods, and another 30% is animal products. So the Americans are eating 90% of their diet. And by the way, the American diet is only 2% vegetables, and I'm saying vegetables should be the majority of what you eat, not just 2% of your diet.
Well, Dr. Furhman, as promised, you're pretty radical. It's been fascinating talking with you. And I do hope you'll come back one day and answer more of my listeners' questions. But I am really appreciative of you sharing all your obvious knowledge about nutrition with us. And thank you so much for coming on my podcast. It's been an honor to have you. And I really, really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Always love to help and spread this message. Good luck to you and, of course, all the people you affect.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So today we heard from Dr. Joel Fuhrman, a very famous author, and as he corrected me, he has had 7 New York Times bestsellers. But I am humbled that he would agree to come on my podcast, and I'm sure you have enjoyed all the information that he has shared. Many doctors would like to treat patients and transform the lives of patients by getting to the root cause of disease. But as Dr. Furhman shows, the root cause of most diseases is lack of good nutrition and, of course, our good friend exercise. One has to only treat symptoms and do this for many years to realize that you're not having a significant effect on the population. We cannot only treat symptoms. We need to prevent disease without having to prescribe copious amounts of side effect inducing pills. And so I find a nutritional approach to be very, very important, not just for older people, but as we discussed, for everyone, including pregnant women. It starts in the womb. So I hope you found this podcast interesting. If you did, please click the subscribe button and follow and leave me a comment. And if you leave some questions for Dr. Furhman, I'll be sure to get in touch with him and get answers for you from him. So thank you once again for joining me on Wellness and Wisdom with Dr. Nadu Tuwakli. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.